Hi, everybody. So my name is Tanya Hertz. Most of you know me, but for those of you who don't, I am the director of the Rec Innovation Lab, which is a business incubator, and we are right now a virtual business incubator. And we are just back. This is the first day back for the fall 2020 semester, and we're really happy to be back, and we're really happy to have with us today one of the founding members of the Rec Innovation Lab. He's been with me since the beginning, helped plan all of the the lab itself, although we didn't plan it to be virtual, and known him for even longer than that. He was a former student at San Diego State, and his name is Ryan Vanshur. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Very, very happy to have you. So Ryan, today we wanted to talk a little bit about COVID, about what's some of the things that businesses need to do during these very unusual times, and some of the ways that you yourself in your company, well, maybe first tell us a little bit about you and about your company.
Yeah, so my name is Ryan Vanshur, San Diego State graduate, was in Tanya's entrepreneurship classes, kind of the first time I even heard the term. And while I was there, we, myself and a group of students worked through a entrepreneurship center to build a company called CourseKey. So we were started back in 2012. We've been in business for just a little under 6 years, I think, at this point. Or sorry, 2014. And we've been in business for about 6 years at this point. We started as kids in a library, really, went through the program, started really getting involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem in San Diego, and sort of just kind of grew in phases to where we're at today. We're currently a Series A venture-backed company, probably worth a little bit over $20 million, I think was the last number I heard. About halfway getting, kind of ramping up to start going towards our Series B. So it's definitely been a long road, but, a kind of a interesting story to go from student startup company to kind of full-fledged education, technology provider. So it's been great.
And a $20 million education provider at that. I mean, that's
yeah. And the goal right now is 5x that. So I think we have the team, and we're starting to get the momentum. I think that we need to do that.
Yeah, it looks like you guys are on your way. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me when I need a little pick me up, a little jolt. I love to just look and see what you are doing at CourseKey, and you always impress me. So what have you been doing, particularly in response to the pandemic? Have you had to pivot, and then what of those what did that pivot look like? Or maybe you can just tell us about one successful pivot that you've had, and then maybe something that didn't work as well, a pivot that wasn't as successful.
Yeah, so I guess it's better to start with the pain, right? So I think it was a pivot, but it was a pivot from a very, unsuccessful attempts at scaling the business, right? So sometimes when you're young, like we got a little bit of startup money, and we started just running way too fast, way too quick, expanding places we probably shouldn't have been, didn't have product market fit like we thought, we did. There's just a lot of things that we could have took our time, I think. And when we look back, we realize, it was kind of foolish, but at the same time, it drug us down the path where we learned what the company could and then what it shouldn't be. And so there was a point, I think in 2017, where, Luke, our CEO and the founder of the company, brought us all into, a little room. We had kind of looked back on the few years of data that we had at that point and realized, continuing in the way that we were was going to be too expensive, too resource, driven. There was too much competition, and the likelihood of us, really making it through that year as a company was pretty slim. So that pivot was to go to, a different market with the same product that actually had, a underlying, business value that they could attach to it. But to do that, we basically had to, gut half the company, so to speak. So we ended up mostly, my team, we ended up letting go of pretty much everybody except a few, kind of key personnel, so that we can downsize, kind of contract, refocus our efforts, and go tackle another market. But since that pivot, we went from spinning our wheels, burning through money, 6 months of runway at a time, not sure how we were going to pay paychecks every once in a while, to now, Luke's just done a great job of getting us in, really good financial shape, where we downsized. We were, we really understood our metrics. And so at this point, we went from, that initial one client in that other space, we're sitting, I think 60 plus today since we've done that change. And these are, enterprise-wide clients. These are 2-3 year contracts. And there's a lot more value that we can provide to an entire organization versus, you kind of were there when we were just working with you guys as instructors.
Yeah.
So now we're working with entire campuses, and it's a lot more, sustainable for our business to do that.
Absolutely. So yeah, I remember that well, and none of us like having to lay people off. And I remember when you were going through that, and that's a really horrible thing, having to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about a successful pivot? Tell us about something good that you, a successful pivot, because I really was terrified for you and for pretty much every entrepreneur that I knew when this pandemic started. And I saw a lot of very, very successful companies and really smart people lose their companies when COVID hit, and when we realized that it was going to stay. And I was happy to see that that you were successful in your pivoting. So tell us what that looked like. How were you able to pivot? Because I mean, this was your tool. Your Course Key is a tool that tracks attendance, and tracking attendance in a virtual realm. I mean, that doesn't sound like, it sounds like you would have gone under, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess fortunately we made the pivot we did a while ago, right? Because a lot of the bigger schools are made for online learning. The little schools that we work with, they're so hands-on, and they're so, activity driven, because you're talking about electricians and, auto mechanics and nurses and phlebotomy techs and people who literally need to prove that they have a skill set, in person. And so when we heard, as a attendance technology that proves people are in a brick and mortar location, Luke, in his early, following of the pandemic, kind of raised the flag and said, hey, this could get big and it could get bad. And all of our revenue was essentially at risk. And so we, as a team, kind of, triaged a little bit for the next few months and figured out, what could we do to match what the market now needed. And so we came up with a new biometrics technology, that basically allows us to verify students are who they are just with their thumbprint or facial recognition using their phone, right? And before that wasn't available. It was always a QR code or a sound or something, a GPS location you physically had to be at. So we created a way for students to check in online in case they were teaching in a Zoom session like this, because not everybody was able to jump right into full online. It was basically, let's get Zoom set up, but we still need to track attendance. We still need to make sure people are following along.
So now you have biometrics to do that. So you can physically prove somebody's there at their on their
computer,
screen in their class.
It's not gam checking in for them anymore, right?
Yeah.
So we found a small, and the team delivered that. The development team, we have to give them a ton of credit. When Luke said, this is what's going to keep us, in the game with our current clients and sustain that business, I think within about 2 or 3 weeks, because we follow an agile type project, they were able to go in pretty effectively and create that fast. And then that led us to kind of the biggest, and I wouldn't call it a benefit as much as the market really realizing, we're always championing, virtual and paperless and things like that, but we didn't understand how important touch-free would be, like to eliminate the need for people to touch things like sign-in rosters, sign-in sheets, and things like that. So what they also needed was a screening process. So if they're going to open up and go back to school, they need a way to have people screen without having to use pen and pencils and thermometers and desk and queue lines. So we created a tool called the COVID Health Check Survey, and within a couple months working with some of our clients and following some of the CDC guidelines, now all of our clients are using the same tool that everybody checks in for attendance with to do a self, reporting survey. You answer the questions. If you get a yes on any of them, it gives you a red card. Somebody's automatically notified. So just that one feature alone has generated a couple $100,000 in revenue we would have never have had as like expansion opportunity to create more value for more clients. And it all stems from that kind of paperless, touch-free, post-COVID world that we're heading towards. So, those are things where you never, in March, we couldn't have told you it would, all of our business would be at risk, but within a few months it would be saved. And then, after that time, you would have another opportunity to generate income that was not possible pre-COVID. Nobody needed a health screen tool.
I'm anxious to see what kind of businesses are going to, spring up to to really take advantage of this new touch-free economy and some of the many other economies that have they've materialized out of nowhere, and it's so exciting to always see it's the entrepreneurs that are solving the problems. It's definitely not the politicians. So okay, we have a lot of students going into one of the probably most challenging semesters of their life. If they haven't already been in that, I'd love to hear you share, if you wouldn't mind, about some challenging semesters. Tell us about one of the more challenging semesters that you've had personally, and what did you do? How did you make it through? What helped you to persevere through those bad times? Just to give a little advice to the people out there who are going into a bad semester, obviously.
Sure. And I know we're getting close on time, so I'll try to keep it short. But basically, my semester when I transferred from community college down to San Diego State was probably one of the tougher ones. I don't know if everybody's heard my story, but if you find it in our little, YouTube channel, I was diagnosed with cancer immediately when I got to San Diego State. And so I was already told it would be challenging going from the 2-year to the 4-year, and that it's going to be a different type of, learning environment, and it's going to be a little bit tougher. So I was, ready for that. But then when they told me I had to go through chemotherapy at the same time, and still try to go through school full time just to, keep my scholarships and things, that was pretty tough. And what's interesting was because I was doing chemotherapy, it was kind of like what they suggest with COVID now for me. Like I had no immune system. So they were telling me to wear masks. They were telling me to socially distance. I was in the hospital, 10 days out of every month doing my treatment. So I learned immediately how to use, some of these recording tools. And I had students who were taking pictures and using technology to help me capture lectures and notes. Mm-hmm. And so if anybody's kind of feeling like you're not in the environment you're used to thriving in, because I sat in the front of the class, I raised my hand, I asked questions, I was super active before. And then when I had to go to the hospital, it probably feels like what you guys feel now, where you're just sitting on the other side of the screen. And so if that's the case, one thing that you can do is create a community, right? Whether it's the informal Facebook group that pops up, or, a Google Doc that everybody kind of chat, helps to create study notes in, or whatever. I had a lot of students who kind of gathered around me to help me for whatever reason when I was at State. And there was like a small, like virtual community that popped up where if I wasn't in the lecture, even the instructors were using things like, I think it was like a capture program where I would log into Blackboard and they would stream it just for me so that I could be technically in the class like this. So get used to the tools and look for productivity tools and find better ways to manage your time if they're not going to manage it for you. And that's what you're used to. And the biggest thing is have a community, like find people that are going through what you're going through and might have some tips or tricks. And, you just kind of have to get a little bit more entrepreneurial, I guess you can say, in your learning strategy during this time. But, as you've heard, for me, that early exposure to education and technology and how it intertwined got me passionate and is what led me to want to join CourseKey with Luke. And so that sort of, negative turned into a huge positive, based on, everything that's happening today.
When we first started the rec, we were planning on being on campus. And then you remember when we very quickly had to pivot to a virtual environment. I remember a conversation you and I were having, and I thought we would lose more than half of the teams that were going through the rec, because I thought, well, for sure they're not going to want to stick around. And I mean, this is huge what's happening. We're going into this global pandemic, and there's no way that we're going to be able to keep the teams, at the rec. And I was so shocked when not one team, not one person dropped off, and they stayed and they went through that first semester all together. And then again, when they, the next semester during the summer. And I recently asked one of the students, like, why did you stick around? Why wouldn't you just say, like, forget it? This is crazy. Yeah. And, she said that this has given her a community, it's right. Given her a community, people who are, going through it at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I moved out to Phoenix and I'm mentoring the same teams that I worked with when I was sitting there in San Diego. So it's like, that at this point, it is what it is. Either you're going to, kind of move on and get with these digital times and use these tools and become more efficient, or you're not. And I think the companies who are choosing not to do that are the ones that are closing their doors in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, good advice. Thank you so much, Ryan. I love chatting with you, and I know we went over on time, but thank you.
Sorry, Jeremy. Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
No worries at all. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone. We'll next time we'll be better. All right. Take care. Bye.